Well, welcome again to North Shore. It's so good to see all of you who are gathered here in this room, and I want to say hi to the folks who may be joining us online. We're glad you're with us as well. My name is Scotty. I'm the pastor here. If we haven't met, I'd love to meet you after the service in the lobby. You can say hi in the chat as well. And yes, we are just 2 weeks away from Easter, and I just want to name a really important thing for us here at North Shore. It's not just a time for us to celebrate. We celebrate the risen Christ every Sunday. It's also a time for us to invite our friends and family to be able to hear and experience the power of that story in their life as well. I will be preparing a message that really has that seeking or hurting or skeptical friend of yours in mind. So I just want to challenge you. You got 2 weeks. It's a lot of time. Make an invitation. Invite that person that's on your mind, on your heart. God's gonna probably lead you to a providential encounter this week with someone, and it's gonna come to your mind. I could just say, hey, you wanna come to Easter at my church? Take a risk and do it. I also wanna ask all of you who are able, if you call North Shore home, to attend at 8 a.m. or 12:30. We'll have a life-size chocolate bunny at those two services only. I'm just kidding, we won't have that. But we wanna make room for the guests who'll be here at our other services. And then finally, we're gonna be hosting two Good Friday services, one here in Kirkland and one in Mill Creek at Visible Coffee in the Mill Creek Town Center. Both services will be at 7 o'clock. Both will help you experience the power of the cross in a fresh new way in your life. And of course, you can find all this information at northshore.church/Easter. But if it's your first time here, or maybe your first time in a while, we are in week 5 of our series called Jesus Gets It. Looking at the 7 statements that Jesus made when he was crucified on that cross, because each one of those statements tells us something really important about who Jesus is and how he can relate to the pain and problems that we face in our lives. Whether it's feeling abandoned by God or dealing with broken relationships or even living with physical and material needs like hunger and thirst and housing issues and all those things. But today, we're gonna be going on what may be the most difficult journey of this entire series. As we talk about the hurts and wrongs and even abuses that have happened to us in our lives. Like that parent who neglected you, or that partner who betrayed you, or that person who abused you. So I just want to say here at the beginning of this message may feel heavy, even uncomfortable at times. If you have young kids with you, I know we did our dedications today. If you have young kids with you and you don't feel ready to talk about this on the way home, now would be a great time to check them into North Shore Kids if you want to do that. And if you're a guest and you're suddenly feeling this desire to have come on a different Sunday, don't leave or log off, because here's the deal. We have all been hurt by somebody at some point. And we all know how hard it is to try to heal and move forward from those pains. So this is a really important conversation, regardless of age, stage, faith background. And so because of that, I just actually want to start with a quick prayer. So if you would pray with me. Jesus, we are grateful that in these moments when we dive into hard topics, that you get it. And not from a sermonizing kind of way, but from an experiential way. You came into this world and you experienced the realities of human life in terms of being and experiencing wrongdoing, mistreatment, and pain. And so, Jesus, we want to hear directly from you. May my words be used by you to speak to each and every heart today. The words we need to hear that we could take the next step you're calling us to take today. And we pray this in your name. And everybody said, amen. So when I was in 7th grade, I was, a little on the smaller side for my age. And by smaller side, I mean like minion small. Like I was like 4 feet and a bit, not more than 75 pounds. And because of my size, there was a kid in our school, in my class, who bullied me quite a lot by physically pushing me around or verbally mocking me in front of others. He would even bully other kids into bullying me. There was one time he actually convinced or bullied this other student to start a fight with me. And I'll just tell you, I had never been in a fight before. I knew nothing about how to fight. But I guess the Holy Spirit did, because for some reason in that moment, I felt this sudden surge of strength and confidence. It was like God downloaded how to throw a perfect punch into my brain as a 7th grade student, because I pulled back my right arm. I made like the perfect fist with my hand, and I threw what was, I still believe, the most powerful punch in 7th grade playground history. Like, it was remarkable. Well, thank you for that. I appreciate that. That was a pity clap, just for those of you who don't know. The only problem with that punch was I missed. And sadly, the other kid did not. And you can imagine how the rest of the story played out. Now, I have to say, that kid who hit me ended up becoming a good friend, probably also out of pity, but I'll take it. But the kid that started it, the kid that bullied me, the kid that would push me around, the kid who I still remember, I can still experience and feel some of those moments. I hated him. And I would ruminate on these fantasies about getting revenge or seeing him get what he deserved. I would literally pray, God, blank that kid. Anybody else ever feel that way about somebody or something that happened? And by the way, this is really just the normal human response to being wronged or hurt. And not just to the big wrongs in life, but even to the little minor ones that we experience, right? Like when you get cut off in traffic, or when there's gossip about you at work or at school, or when that person at the grocery store in line in front of you decides to pay with a check. And you're like, God, strike them down, like in this moment. Because here's the deal, inside the human heart, inside of you and in me, regardless again of faith or background or whatever you believe, inside the heart, we want people to get what we think they deserve. And this isn't a new thing, it's as old as the human race. In fact, really interesting, in the ancient Roman world, people didn't just hold grudges in other people, they would actually pronounce curses on other people who had wronged them. I don't know if you know this. And they wouldn't just pronounce or say a curse, people would hire a person who was called a curse writer. It's a real job in the ancient world, a curse writer who would inscribe their curse on a stone tablet or clay pot. And this practice was so common, archaeologists have found thousands of these curse tablets about all kinds of offenses, from the really serious to the really humorous. I found kind of a funny example of one of these written curses about a man named Eukyrios. We don't know who Eukyrios was or what he did. All we know is that he was a chariot racer in that time, and somebody really wanted him to lose. So the curse went like this. I love this one. Listen to this. Curse was, I invoke you, holy angels and holy names, tie up, block, strike, overthrow, harm, destroy, kill, and shatter Eukyrios, the charioteer, and all of his horses tomorrow in the arena of Rome. Let the starting gates not open properly. Let him not compete quickly. Let him not pass. Let him not make the turn properly. It's so detailed, isn't it, right? Let him not receive the honors. Let him not squeeze over and overpower. Let him not come from behind and pass, but instead let him collapse. Let him be bound. Let him be broken up, and let him drag behind, both in the early races and the later ones. As if the gods didn't know there was 2 sessions of races in that, right? It's funny, right? But here's the thing. That's exactly how you think and talk when you're on the 405, is it not? Like, don't let the Tesla pass, but let it be broken up and whatever else, right? Here's my point in all this. It is part of our nature to think, because you hurt me, I'm gonna hurt you. Because you wronged me, I'll wish wrong on you. And here's the problem with this. The problem is, as good as this might feel in the moment, and as necessary as it is to find healthy ways to vent and express anger or sadness, this urge to get even, this longing to see vengeance, this hope that I can make things right or better by cursing you or condemning you, doesn't right the wrong or heal the hurt. It doesn't matter how good it feels, it does not right the wrong or heal the hurt. In fact, it just keeps all those hurts inside you. There's a really interesting book, some of you know this, on trauma called The Body Keeps the Score. And what the research in the book shows is that when we go through a traumatic experience, like being harmed or wrong, the neurons in our brains actually get rewired in such a way that our bodies physically cannot forget that experience. And I've experienced this firsthand. In fact, I remember going back to that story I told you, I remember seeing a picture of that middle school bully on social media. Years later, grown up, living probably a very normal, happy life. But when I saw that picture, when I saw his face, the muscles in my body got physically tense. My heart rate went up. I could feel like the stress hormones pumping through my veins. Because the pain of being wronged and hurt doesn't just go away. Our bodies, your body, keeps the score. And here's the deal. I know for a fact, not knowing all of you or your stories, I am not the only one who has experienced this. Statistically speaking, in a room like this, there is 100% chance that there are multiple stories of domestic violence, sexual abuse, child abuse, rape, neglect, emotional abuse, bullying, physical violence, betrayal, deception, 100% chance. And I just want to pause and say it. I am really sorry that happened to you. I'm really sorry that happened to you. That's not what God wanted for you. But as painful as these stories are, and as much as they can challenge our faith, here's the good news: Jesus gets it. Just think about all the wrongs that were done to him in his life. He was betrayed by a very close friend. He was slandered and wrongly accused of something he did not do. He was condemned and bullied by a hostile crowd of people. He even experienced a version of church hurt. I know this was before the church started, but remember, it was the religious leaders in his day who were supposed to be trustworthy and caring, but instead used their authority and power to shame and discredit him. And then after he was arrested, he was beaten, stripped naked, spit on, and mocked as King of the Jews, which means Jesus was a victim of physical, emotional, verbal, and psychological abuse. And some scholars would even say he was a victim of sexual abuse. And I imagine anyone who's been stripped naked in public would agree. And then he was taken against his will and nailed to a cross next to two thieves, one last form of total humiliation. And we shouldn't think for a second that these hurts didn't hurt. We shouldn't think for a second that Jesus wasn't tempted to feel all the same rage and hate and desire for vengeance. Son of God, but fully human. In fact, the book of Hebrews tells us that Jesus was tempted in every way, which means he would have been tempted to feel exactly what you're tempted to feel. And remember, this is the least deserving person being wronged in the most atrocious way. I mean, I fly off the handle when someone takes too many items into the express line. And I have too many items in the express line, right? But the injustice of the Son of God being crucified on a cross next to a bunch of criminals, it's just remarkable. So what did he say in response? What kind of curse came out of his mouth? Here's the story from the Gospel of Luke. Luke writes that two other men, both criminals, were also let out with him to be executed. When they came to the place called the Skull, they crucified him there, along with the criminals, one on his right, the other on his left. And then Jesus said, "Father, blank them, for they do not know what they are doing." And I can imagine a ton of different words I would have said in that moment, can't you? But look at what Jesus said. "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they're doing." Forgive them. Forgive them. Forgive them. Now, just so you know, to be clear, forgiveness or forgiving isn't the same as forgetting or excusing or condoning or just glossing over. Nor is it the same thing as trying to be reconciled to another person. God's heart for us is reconciliation. But on the cross, Jesus wasn't trying to reconcile with the soldiers who put him there because they weren't looking for that. And sometimes there are relationships in our lives where reconciliation won't be possible because of safety or geography or just because the other person isn't looking for it. See, reconciliation happens between people. Forgiveness is just something that happens inside people. And that's what God cares about the most, because you can't control other people, but you can let God into your heart where all the hate and all the grudges and all the bitterness and all the resentment may be alive and well in you. And we need to let God into that place because, and this is a key principle in all this, you cannot heal a hurt and hold a grudge at the same time. You cannot heal a hurt and hold a grudge at the same time. It can't happen. You see, to heal, we have to go on this journey called forgiveness. So then how do we do that? How do we forgive? How do we forgive? Especially when it feels just impossible to forgive. Well, the very first part of the answer is, it is not easy. It's not easy. This isn't going to be kind of a 1, 2, 3 today and you're done tomorrow, especially if there's been some kind of violence or abuse. And by the way, pause just to say it. If you are currently in a situation where you're experiencing abuse or threats of violence, the first step is not to forgive. The first step is to get out, to get help, to find safety with friends or family or here at the church, because you cannot forgive if you do not feel safe. But even if you're in a safe place, forgiveness is hard, it's messy, it's complicated, it takes time, it can take years. Some of you have been on a journey of forgiveness for years and years, decades perhaps. Some of you will be on a journey of forgiveness throughout your entire life. And you can't do it alone either. You need support. You need encouragement. You need people who can relate, who get it, who've been there, who share a similar kind of story. By the way, that's what our network of life groups and care groups are all about. Because while no one has been through exactly what you've been through, someone else has been through something similar enough to look you in the eye and say, I understand. And you need that. By the way, that's also why it's so important for us to be gathering week after week in this room together. I know some of you are online because of physical or health or geographic constraints, and I love that you're able to be online, but the reality is, if you're able, you need to be here in the room because someone else in this room has been through what you've been through. And every time we're here, it's your opportunity to find that person and not be walking alone anymore. Which, by the way, I know it can be super scary to think about being in a church environment or a Christian environment and to be able to have to be vulnerable or talk to somebody about experiencing hurt. And by the way, I understand why. Because there have been far too many examples out in the church world of someone coming into a church community with a story of being wronged or hurt and not being believed or feeling dismissed, or sometimes even feeling or being blamed for that hurt. Like, well, if you just made some better decisions, then maybe this wouldn't have happened to you. And not only is that sinful and hurtful, it's one of the main reasons why so many people are leaving the church today, more than any other time in our nation's history. It's not because they want nothing to do with Jesus, it's because they want nothing to do with Christians who in their mind are unsafe to be hurt around. Now, I'll just say it, we are not a perfect church, far from it. And I am not a perfect leader, really, really far from it. But one of the main reasons our family came to the North Shore was because this church is a place where it's okay to not be okay, where it's okay to be hurt and broken and angry and sad. But here's the thing, I don't want to just be a church where it's safe to feel hurt. I do want that. I also want to be a church where it's safe to get healed. And that takes time and prayer and faith and friends, and eventually, it takes forgiving. It takes forgiving. And then a process of working through and working out that forgiveness. See, here's the thing. Forgiveness is both a choice and a process. It's a choice and it's a process. The choice is just about making a conscious decision to let go of resentful thoughts and bitter grudges and say, I forgive you. Whether to a person or sometimes it just has to happen in your own heart. And again, this choice can take a lot of time to get to, but at some point, there's a decision that you have to make, a line in the sand you have to draw that says, I will forgive, no matter how deep the hurt. It's a choice. But forgiveness is also a process. And I want to spend a few extra moments here because so many people, followers of Jesus included, who want to forgive or who decide to forgive, but what happens is they don't actually feel any freedom, or they keep having negative and resentful and bitter thoughts all the time. And it's because there's actually a process we have to work through to begin to identify and uproot all those negative emotions and feelings about that person who hurt you or harmed you. It's actually a Christian psychologist named Everett Worthington, whose work I've just been introduced to fairly recently. And he's not only a leading researcher in how to forgive, he's also someone who had to personally learn how to forgive something that for him felt unforgivable. See, about 30 years ago, someone broke into his mother's home and violently beat her to death. And then that perpetrator avoided conviction because of a mishandling of evidence in the trial. And part of what he realized is you can't just decide to forgive. You have to begin to figure out how to process all those negative emotions and feelings that are happening inside you. So he writes about this process you have to go to that he calls emotional forgiveness. And he walks through the process this way. I'm going to put up the kind of the steps or the process, if you will. And by the way, we'll publish this week so you can kind of learn more about it as well as his writings. It's a little acronyms that spells REACH if you follow that down. But the first step of this process of emotional forgiveness is this idea of recalling, actually recalling what happened very objectively, no better, no worse, what actually happened to you, and going back to that place. As hard as that is to do, we actually have to go back and recall the hurt. And then even more challenging is a process. And again, this takes a lot of time and maybe a lot of help and counsel, but to begin to actually empathize with the person who did the hurting, who did the harming. I have a friend who describes setting up 2 chairs. One chair he'll sit in and actually describe his experience of being hurt. Then he'll go to the other chair and actually talk from the perspective of the person who hurt him, their reason or their background or their who they are in terms of why they would have done something like that. To begin to walk and experience life in their shoes. Because the reality is that person, as awful as they may be or what they did, was probably someone who was hurt as well. Probably someone who was abused as well. And to begin to empathize. And then along the journey, there's this moment where we begin to have to see forgiveness in an altruistic way where, yes, forgiveness is for us. Yes, forgiveness means we get to let go. Yes, we can be healed. But we begin to see that forgiveness is actually this gift we can give to another person that is good for them. And this takes actually going back through and remembering something that you've done to someone else and remembering the gift of them saying, I forgive you. And then beginning to imagine, how can I give that gift to someone else? Why Paul calls grace a gift. It's something that we give to others. And then fourth is a process or a moment where we commit. We write down or say, I forgive you. Write it on a card. Put a date on it when you make that decision. It's not just abstract thinking. You put a date on it, you write it down. And then last, holding on. That means you come back to that card. It's at your desk. It's in your bathroom. It's somewhere where you can see it over and over so you can hold on to that decision you made. And these steps aren't just linear or you do them in 5 days and you're done. You can be working through this throughout your whole life. And it can take a lot of time. And it's not easy. And by the way, this process is something that, again, we have to keep coming back to, even with some of the same sins we've experienced. But what's really interesting is you can see traces of this same emotional process in what Jesus did for you and me on the cross. When he cried out, Father, forgive them, he was recalling the hurts and the wrongs done to him. When he said they don't know what they're doing, he's empathizing, putting himself in our shoes, not experiencing it as if he was one of us. When he gave up his life, it wasn't for his good, it was for a gift. It was for you and for me. When he took his last breath, he committed, this is real, it's gonna cost him everything. And then when he ascended to heaven to be our advocate, it means he's holding on to that forgiveness when we keep messing up and messing up and messing up. Which means you can go on this journey too. I don't want to belittle or dismiss the pain that's happened to you, the hurt, the wrong, or how bad it was, how bad it is. But you can go on this journey. It might feel impossible right now. It might take years to walk through, but forgiveness is a choice we make and a process we go on, a journey we go on. And we're actually going to all take a next step on that journey, wherever you may be in your life. We're all going to take a next step in a few moments. But before we do that, I just want to name something that some of you are feeling about forgiveness right now in your life. Either because the wrong that was done to you was so severe or maybe so recent. Some of you are thinking, what if I don't even want to forgive? What if I don't even want to do that? I don't want to go on this journey. I don't want to think any more about it. I hear you, I've been there. And sometimes the only prayer you can pray is, God, help me want to forgive. Just help me want to forgive. And if that's where you are, that can be enough. That can be a next step for right now. But I also just want to let you know, when it comes to the hurts in your life, there are really only two options for you when it comes to the pain, the wrongs, the hurts. There's two options. Either you can let your body keep the score, and it will never heal fully. Or you can let Jesus' body keep the score. Because see, when he got on that cross, when he gave up his life, he was taking on all our sin, including the sins that were done to you. And on that cross, he didn't say, Father, curse them. He said, Father, forgive them. And not just some of them or a few of them, but all of them, including you and including the person who's hurt you. Forgive them too, he said. Forgive them too. So we're gonna take some time to do some work on forgiveness together right now. So if you just close your eyes, bow your heads for just a moment. And I just want to walk you through a couple of scenarios and give you a few seconds even, just to take a step on this journey right now. Like I said, some of you are in a place where you don't want to forgive. The pain is too real, it's too recent, feels too heavy. The hate in your heart is just too present. And I want to invite you right now to take a real bold step with Jesus, who's right here. He's right here in this room with you. Imagine him reaching out and taking your hand and holding it right now. And just letting you know it's enough just to ask, God, help me want to forgive. And if that's where you are, I just want to invite you to pray that prayer. God, help me want to forgive. And that's enough. Some of you right now are in a moment where maybe it's been enough time, or you've processed or received counsel, but you've never actually taken a moment to decide, to choose to say, I forgive that person. Maybe you think you have, but again, there was never a clear moment that you could put a date, a moment, a decision point around. And I want to invite you to take the bold step right now to make that choice if you're able. And right now, imagine Jesus right there next to you, holding your hand. He died for them too. And you can just say, in the quiet of your heart, I forgive. And you can put the name in the blank. I forgive you. Take a moment and do that. And then for one more scenario, one more moment, some of you right now, even as we've been going through this message, your mind has been racing. Maybe you feel in your body like you're back in that place, you're back with that person, you're back in that hurt. And all that ruminating, all that thinking, I know this place, I know what that's like, is actually just as harmful for you as the hurt that was done. And so I want to invite you right now in a moment of surrender to start here, imagine all the things you've ever done, all the mistakes, all the hurts you've caused. Imagine all those written out like on a whiteboard. And seeing Jesus begin to erase each one. I forgive you. I forgive you. I forgive you. And then when you're in that place, if you can get to that place, just imagine, I know all the ruminating, all the bitterness, all the resentment. Imagine that person who's harmed you, all their sins on that same board. And Jesus, because of the cross, looking at them and being willing to say, even knowing what they did, I forgive you. I forgive you. I forgive you. See, forgiveness at the end of the day is surrender. It's surrender to the cross. It's surrender to God's grace. It's surrender to His mercy. It's surrender to His justice. It's trusting that only Jesus, because of the cross, can right that wrong and heal your hurt. And He can. And so we're going to take a moment right now and sing our surrender together.